I am Marie Nelson, and I'm the Senior Director and Executive Producer of News and Original Programming at BET Networks, which is a part of the broader Viacom family. So for those of you out there who watch MTV, CMT, VH1, CBS for that matter, I'm part of that team. And today I'm really pleased to join you because I've been following this process and this lead up to the summit over the last several months. And there have been some fascinating conversations, and I think that this morning rather, we're gonna have another one. I'm also incredibly excited because this is pretty much my only time to be able to corner José Andrés. I tried to sneak into his GW class, but they figured out pretty quickly that I wasn't a student. And so that wasn't going to work out for me. But alas, I've got him. So we are now going to be joined by two other guests. I'm first going to introduce Dr. Shenggen Fan, who is the Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute. That's right. Dr. Fan joined IFPRI in 1995 as a research fellow conducting extensive research on pro-poor development strategies in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. He led their program on public investment before becoming the director of the Institute's Development Strategy and Governance Division back in 2005. Also, he is the chairman of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Food and Nutrition Security. We are also excited today to be joined by Krysta Harden. Krysta is the Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Agriculture. And there's something just outstanding about being able to introduce someone and begin their bio by saying that she was born in Georgia. I don't know, there's something about that. Wonderful. And raised on a peanut farm, no less. And after moving to Washington, she went on to have a long career on Capitol Hill. She worked for the House Agriculture Committee, served as Chief of Staff and Press Secretary for former Georgia Democratic Congressman Charles Hatcher, and has held a number of posts in government and in the private sector. And we're pleased to have you with us here today. Thank you. So if you are following this cast of our little Gilligan's Island, we have a policymaker, we have a researcher, we have a culinary tastemaker and a food advocate, and all of these folks here are assembled to talk about innovation, changing tastes, and food security. So I will humbly submit to you that I am not an expert in the food security world. I am an expert in eating, but I come to this conversation as a communicator, someone who cares about the challenge, and someone who wants to look at ways that we can find strategies to engage the broader public. So I will ask our guests to help us expand what is sometimes a very insider conversation. And so, Jose, just to continue the thread from your conversation, I'd like to start with you. I drive a Fiat 500. I've never met a farmer's market that I didn't love. I'm addicted to heirloom tomatoes, Brussels sprouts, pork belly, quinoa, and agave nectar. So my question is, when it comes to the issue of food security, are consumers like me part of the problem or part of the solution?
Wow, thank you for making me the first to answer this. Quick thoughts. You mentioned quinoa, and you love quinoa. We read a few months ago about how in the countries of origin where quinoa comes from, the price went up. And the price went up because people like you that probably were doing it because A, it's a great product. Actually, I love quinoa. Become like the new grain. And more often than not, the marketing materials will be telling you that if you eat quinoa, you will not only be healthier, but you will be helping rural economies in faraway countries. Wow, all of this looks great. Well, if then we see that for some of those people that their main staple was quinoa, in the process of you trying to do good, actually, maybe we were doing bad. And this is at the heart of who we are when we try to decide how we're going to be feeding this planet. To understand that every single decision that may happen in the Hill, at the White House, or may happen in the office of a CEO of a big company, every decision has repercussions down the food chain that we are going to have to be more aware when we make a decision. As a consumer, as a company, as a policymaker, we're going to have to be thinking the 360. We cannot make decisions anymore based only in one thing. We're going to have to see how this is going to trickle down in the positives and also in the negatives. And we're going to have to make sure that always the positives are bigger than the negatives.
Dr. Fan, you want to jump in on this?
Well, I'm a researcher. In fact, I was also a farmer, a rice farmer, when I was in China 35 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago. So as a researcher, I really wanted to challenge the audience here. How can we introduce new innovations to make sure that we produce enough food, nutritious food, sustainably, so sustainability. Innovations are key. It's not only technological innovations, but also innovations in policy as policymakers. So you have a big job to do. And also institutions. In terms of technology, about 2 weeks ago, I was visiting International Rice Research Institute, the world top research institute on rice. So now they are introducing newer varieties that can enhance nutrition. Same type of rice, where you don't need to eat quinoa, but eat rice. But that rice has high content of vitamin A, iron. And that type of rice can also adapt to climate change. I think in the previous session we heard about how climate change will affect food production. So that varieties can also adapt to climate change. Can also save water, save energy. The C4 rice, it's called, it has 4 carbons instead of 3 carbons. Policy innovations or policy changes are so critical. We know that in many parts of the world, India, China, even more gradually probably Brazil, they begin to subsidize their food production, which is good. But on the other hand, too much subsidies can also cause overuse of water, overuse of energy, and probably cause pollutions to our water, to our land. So we need to change the policies where the farmers can truly respond to the market demand. Similarly, consumers. Consumers, to me, yes, well, Jose raised a very good question. The consumers need to pay the right price where the environmental costs, health costs have also been integrated into that pricing. Institutional innovations, how can we do things better by working together? Farmers Association, particularly Women Farmers Association, they can really push some changes to make sure that their voices can be heard. They can increase their bargaining power with consumers, with the big companies that Jose also mentioned, big companies, so they can have a decent share from the whole value chain.
Dr. Fan, I want to share a blog posting. GW sent a team of students and professors to Africa this summer, and they were efforting to both see firsthand some of these innovations and then to document them. And there was a blog posting that was written by Sarah Snyder. If Sarah's here, I hope you don't mind that I've taken the liberty of pulling that. But and she wrote, she said, as for food production, there is no question that Africa is booming with opportunity. Whether the innovation is as simple as a greenhouse in Zanzibar or as complex as a mobile application which eliminates corruption in Nairobi, there are large and small scale solutions that are actually working and helping to feed the planet. And then Dr. Imani Shears, who was also heading up that trip, went on to say, the biggest innovation in Kenya is not the latest mobile apps or the vibrant tech centers, but the empowerment these tools are giving the people. And so certainly we have many students who are here who are participating in this conversation. who certainly are looking for the opportunity to see firsthand, touch, taste, and feel what this means in real terms. What would you say to them?
Yeah. Well, first, let me appreciate these young people's dedication to African development, African food, nutrition security. So the young generation is our future. So I'm so glad that the young people like Sarah is very interested in African development. Yes, there are many sort of innovations, not necessarily probably the so-called best innovations. Some innovations can be easily distributed to farmers, to even producers and practitioners. They can speed up the use of these modern technologies, like cell phones. Cell phone is widely used in Africa, but they need good content in their cell phone so they can use it to improve their farming practices. They can improve their nutrition status of children. So the information, the quality of information will be so critical in that context.
Marie, excuse me a second.
Absolutely,
Can I just add something too that I think that's important for the discussion is the reverse in a way. It's the exchange programs that USDA has with, we call our Borlaug Fellows and our Cochrane Fellows, and it's researchers and academics in developing countries who can spend time in the U.S. and learn from our land-grant universities, learn from our USDA professionals. And so I think it's the exchange. I think it's not just one way. It's not just us going in these countries, in developing countries. It's also bringing folks to the U.S. and having them learn from a lot of our expertise and gain new experiences.
That's a perfect segue, Deputy Secretary, because I think that one of the things about making this connection between innovations and research and policy is just giving folks a sense of the true scope of what it is that we are doing as a government in this area. And so I was wondering if you could just share with us a little bit more broadly what that policy pie looks like.
USDA has a number of programs. We have kind of short-term feeding programs, our McGovern-Dole nutrition program, that feeds a number of young people in developing countries. We have Food for Progress programs. We actually partner with some of the partners and supporters of this conference with helping beginning and new farmers in developing countries get back into maybe raising livestock. Maybe it's one cow at a time, it's a few chickens at a time, but really making a difference in a family, which is going to help the economy. But we also, have education and training programs. I mentioned the exchanges. Other things that we do on the ground, we work with USAID in partnership on the ground. I think it's empowering and developing distribution systems, marketing systems, food safety systems that help over the long term build an economy and a good food system in developing countries.
So I wanted to add, Mrs. Undersecretary, that yes, the leadership of Americas, and it's probably President Eisenhower in '56, created the Food for Peace, and then every other program that has come after, a great way to share with the world the goodness of the earth that America was supposed to be, was producing, and it still is producing as a living country. Sometimes I always say that we cannot do good anymore, that we have to start doing a smart good. A bit in connection with the quinoa. Haiti is a country I've been spending a lot of time the last 3 years trying to learn and absorbing. And we all heard the stories on rice that was being produced in nice quantities in Haiti, but that actually we were sending from Europe, from America, rice to Haiti that actually was cheaper than the rice that the Haitian farmers were producing. And this is the amazing thing that sometimes happen in this world that is open and everyone tries to do good. But that sometimes in trying to do good, we create harm. And that's why I keep emphasizing on the 360. After the earthquake, all the great food, all the amazing quantity of food that the world gave to Haiti was able to solve immediate problems. In the aftermath, kind of the immediate problems were solved. But in the process, without realizing, we put out of work hundreds, if not thousands of farmers because their product was worth nothing anymore. So in the action of doing good, we kind of created a little bit of trouble. And this is, again, the fascinating and the complicated world we live, where every movement, every action has always an outcome that is not maybe the one we thought of.
I want to add one thing here. Yes, I very much agree with what Jose said. However, the US government is thinking of changing the modalities of food aid or food assistance from in-kind food shipment to the combination of cash and food. In many places, they still need the food. If there's no food, right, you give them money. You actually increase the local prices. However, if there is food in the local market, then you ship tons of rice or wheat there, then actually you really depress prices, then the producers will suffer. So it's a combination of different modalities, whether it's cash, whether it's in-kind or vouchers, is a good question. So about probably 2 weeks ago, we had a seminar at the International Food Policy Research Institute to look at the different modalities. And the US government is thinking of changing its food aid modalities. I think this is a great direction.
Finding the right balance, I believe, finding the right balance.
Now, I should have mentioned earlier that we are going to be trying to integrate some questions that are coming to us through the social media universe of Twitter. Bonnie's been kind enough to run some of those out to me, and so I'll try to weave as many of them in as I can. Why don't we start with this one? How do we create a balance between stewardship, conservation, and increased productivity?
I'm happy to start with that. And I think there's challenges in the U.S. as well as in developing countries. I think the U.S. has, farmers here are wonderful stewards of the land by and large. I believe they realize that the more you take out, the more you've got to put in. You can't just take out. And I think we have programs that provide financial assistance to producers, but just as importantly, technical assistance. So producers actually know how to do it themselves in many cases. They have a problem and they need a solution. And productivity is so important. And I think that if we believe the numbers we're hearing, what is it, 9 whatever billion people, and by 2050, we're going to have to increase production. And it's not just in this country, but in developing countries may have to double production. But with that, you're going to have to continue to really incorporate very strong best management practices and stewardship, and looking at how we use our water wisely, how we use energy and other resources.
You know, I want to come back, Jose, just to a little bit of the conversation we were having before. And certainly, you know, there's been a lot of discussion and debate about a particular aspect of changing tastes and changing palates. And that, of course, is, you know, the increasing demand for meat consumption and animal protein consumption. And I'm wondering, how do you mediate that as someone who cares passionately about you know, protecting food for the future, but also teaching folks the best way to feed themselves in the here and now, and then also dealing with the fact that there's such a clear tie to culture when it comes to this part of our lives?
Well, I mean, obviously, you mentioned meat, which is becoming a big issue today because, as it seems in America, I was reading some numbers last week, seems meat consumption has been slightly going down. Slightly, no, it's been going down. Vegetable consumption has been going up. Sugar consumption has been going down. Something is happening. Somebody is doing something well at every level. But it still is not enough. As in Europe and America, we see that meat consumption is actually going down, which is a good thing because we know how hard it can be on the environment and the degradation of the environment, huge quantities of meat production. We see that in the developing countries, India, China, that meat consumption is quickly going up. And this is almost like a moral question. Mm-hmm. If it's true that the best for this world, talking 50, 100 years from now, because the earth we live in, because our own bodies that we want them to be productive and healthy, we are going to have to need more vegetables and more fruits. This is, to me, just unnegotiable at this point. I'm a big meat eater. I love it. But every day I eat less, but I make sure that the one I eat counts. So here is where we're going to have the philosophical question. How, in Europe, in America, that we know that the lifestyles, policy, etc., is going to be putting us more in the direction. I foresee in the future fast food restaurants where it will be 100% vegetables only. I see this will happen. We'll see it in our lifetimes. This will have a very positive influence in everything. Again, from our own health to the environment we live in. We're going to have to be answering of all those billions of people that they are coming out of poverty, that they are moving up, that actually moving up, because this is the history of humanity, meant having the biggest piece of meat in the table. How are we going to be answering the need for that with the real needs of our planet? And what are we going to be doing to training the people in India and Asia that now are coming, in all Asia, that are coming late to the celebration of the goodness of the earth? How are we going to be telling them, actually, meat is not good for your country, not good for your planet, but we've been doing it for a century, but now we are going to eat vegetables, and you're going to follow us with vegetables too. This is going to be the very funny conversation, but very real. We're going to have to be doing a lot of education, engaging in a productive education, and we're talking about innovation. How are we going to produce and convince people that we should be eating less animal protein in quantity, but in higher quality? So our earth will be protected, but our health too. And this is what governments in part are going to have to do a huge job in educating the population.
I was going to say the USDA obviously has a somewhat different take on this question. So I was wondering if you might share.
A little bit. I don't know how much we differ on. I can't look as far out maybe as Jose, but I will say, in emerging middle class, as you look for an emerging middle class around the world, one thing they start wanting is meat protein, and that's when you reference that. I think it's Angola. I could be wrong, but I believe it's Angola is now the 4th largest importer of U.S. chicken. I didn't realize that till recently when I was in sub-Saharan Africa. And that is a symbol to many people that, I can afford this. I can have this in my diet now, something people strive for, as you mentioned. So I think it's the balance. I think it's understanding the good, lean proteins, meat proteins they're very part of our diet in the U.S. And certainly, I think a lot of folks around the world strive for that and want to have that in their diet as well. So it's the balance. If you look at my plate, I hope a lot of you know what my plate is.
Tell us.
Who knows my plate? Who knows anything about my plate?
Good. That's
and
wonderful.
the secretary, very good job.
We're doing something right, and we're trying to educate, especially even younger kids in the school systems, to look at their plate and see what's on there. But it does include, lean protein. It includes dairy, and includes a lot of fruits and vegetables, we hope, and we're certainly pushing for that and hoping that folks, not only in our country but around the world, will understand the balance on the plate.
Dr. Fan, I know we were having a conversation about changing tastes and that you believe that this is something that can absolutely be accomplished.
Yes. Well, firstly, let me just give you 2 statistics. One is right now we have 870 people who are suffering from hunger. Basically do not have enough to eat. 2 billion people, remember 2 billion people are either overweight or obese. 2 billion now. This is a serious issue. You see the overweight, obesity rate in some of the emerging economies, Mexico, Egypt, China, rising dramatically. On a per capita basis, the Chinese, I can say something about China, I'm from China. On per capita basis, the Chinese consume much more meat than Japanese, although the Chinese per capita income is much lower than Japanese. So there's not necessarily a linear correlation between income and meat consumption. So it's a behavior, it's a taste. I think we can change that taste behavior. I think the restaurant industry can do lots of good work. We don't need to eat meat as long as it's tasty, little meat, some vegetables are as good as meat. Now, there's another issue we didn't mention, that is waste, food waste. 30 to 40% of food is wasted. We're talking about increasing production by 60% or doubling food production in developing countries in the next 40 years?
Right.
Food waste is 40%. I think restaurant business can do a lot to reduce that as well.
I love that you say that because, yeah, we are. I know we are part of the problem too. And I always tell
Part of the
my
solution.
people, let's make sure that we are aware of what areas we need to improve so we can be part of the solution. But you said restaurants. It's obviously two types of restaurants. It's few companies that feed millions of people, and it's hundreds of thousands of restaurants that we feed very few. So what a chef like me can change in their menus can have an influence, because we'll have an influence, even it's more a PR and marketing. Then we have the big corporations that any decision they make impacts millions of people overnight, and the big food producing companies. So yes, restaurants, the big ones, the big chains, the small ones, the big corporations, the small corporations, we all combine with the decisions we make. We can be having this input, as you were saying, but actually we're going to have to be working hand by hand with, obviously, the government, making sure that the policies they go after make sense. Everyone agrees or agrees to disagree, but somehow we find the middle ground, and that then all trickles down. But we have to have these synergies, precisely as you say. Restaurants, yes, we have to be at the lead front. A few years ago, I said I will never do a study on the calories of my menu, because I thought, wow, now the government one day is going to be asking me to do this. It's very funny. Recently, the last 4, 5, 6 years, I've been changing my mind. And more, I've been doing a couple of times studies to really understand, for example, what's the calories of every plate I'm serving forward. Not to finger point to big companies, but not looking at what I'm doing myself. So we're going to have to be pragmatic in this conversation. So, very agree.
I was going to say, we just have a few minutes left, and so I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round with our guests here and try and integrate a few more Twitter questions. Why don't we go ahead with this one? Is there a policy change that most leaders can agree is the most critical to address? And I'll direct that to
I have no idea if we can agree or not. But to me, I think education and awareness, putting an emphasis there, I think, on food policy, on food programs, and what is happening. I think at least in the U.S., we take our food so much for granted. We just assume it's going to be there. I don't think people understand what it takes to produce food. I hope that some of these students will intern at USDA or get involved in public service and learn more about the production of their food and where it comes from. We have Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food, a very exciting program where we connect people to where their food's from. So for me, it's just starting maybe with the baseline of just education and nutrition, and more conferences like this, more discussions like this, I think would be very helpful.
I'm going to tag on one other question, which actually comes from your own USDA food security blog, and that is the question of why should young people care about what's going on with the Farm Bill?
The Farm Bill, the first public conference is today, and I think a lot of people believe that the Farm Bill is about the small segment of our population that produces our food, and it's just so much more than that that's involved in there. Obviously, the nutrition programs are authorized in the Farm Bill. It's research, it's trade programs, it's rural development programs. Every one of us eats every day, and this is the overriding comprehensive package of legislation that impacts every one of us. So I just encourage more of you to pay attention and not put it in a little box saying it only impacts a few people. It impacts every single one of us.
Fantastic. Dr. Fan, I'll take another Twitter question. How do we create food solutions from the ground up rather than impressing ideas top down?
Well, I think, yes, there are lots of innovations and lots of good practices from grassroots. We need to learn from them. Then we can synthesize them and scale them up. So if you just do a good thing, then we'll be just limited to yourself. But what we can do is try to learn from you, try to study whether what you have done can be scaled up in other places. Now, I wanted to add what the Secretary said about this mutual learning. I came to this country about 30 years ago as part of the training program. Well, I really learned a lot. So today I can offer some of my help to some of the developing countries, whether it's Africa, China, India. I think this training program played a big role. However, I also wanted to say that USAID used to have a pretty large program in the 70s, 80s. Today, the USDA should really accelerate or even resume some of their great work they did in the maybe 80s, 90s.
And finally, Jose, I come to you with a personal plea, which is that if you ever hear that Padma Lakshmi is leaving Top Chef, I would like you to put in a good word for me.
I think you will do great.
But more seriously,
Padma will get upset with me probably.
more seriously, I am fascinated in figuring out how we make that bridge and how we capture the excitement that's going on right now in the public space about food and how we use that as a platform for educating people about how we feed the planet.
And the secretary has mentioned education is going to be key. I'm so happy that a university like George Washington University, so near the White House, so near the Hill, is really taking an active role with this program, with many other things happening around campus. With the same class I give in this same auditorium, where we had more than 300 students listening to different speakers about and the synergies between food and the world we live in, from national security to science, to obesity, to job creation. And so I think it's good to have so many young people engaged, but only remembering that we have food issues, that we have to see the opportunities to transform them into real growth for all. And everything begins almost here in this table. You see this bottle of water, right? Water is food. And water is the most important food source. If we listen to Stephen Hawking, water is life. We know that water is going to be the issue that we've been mentioning shortly in this panel. I just drank from this bottle. And this is a controversy, because this is not my bottle of water. This is her bottle of water. We can laugh about it. But in my world, I've done something wrong. We need to come up with the simple ideas. In this case, a simple idea will be if I got 2 glasses. So we could be sharing the same bottle of water. So imagine, this may seem naive and a simple example, but we know that even things like water will be huge problems. If we are able to start solving the issues that we're going to face even in this table, of me doing something wrong and drinking out of her bottle of water, and start putting those ideas forward into a bigger scale, maybe by finding the solutions to the simple problems, then one day we'll be able to solve the huge problems, and then answering how we're going to be feeding 9 billion people in the year 2050.
Well, I could not have
Sorry
said
for
it
the
any
water.
better. No, absolutely,
I was so
anytime.
guilty.
I would like to please thank all of our guests here today, and thank you all.